Deep beneath forests, mountains, and ruined castles lie bunkers the Nazis hoped the world would never find. These weren't just military outposts, they were sites of unspeakable experiments, occult rituals, and psychological torture. Sealed, hidden, and erased from official history, they still whisper secrets through cracked concrete and rusted steel. What you're about to discover isn't just disturbing, it's something even the SS tried to bury in silence. These are 5 Nazi bunkers that were never meant to be found. In the dense, mist-wrapped forests of Germany's Harz Mountains, hikers often speak in hushed tones of a place they refuse to mark on maps. It isn't superstition that fuels their silence, but something far older, far darker. Hidden beneath moss and stone lies a Nazi facility long forgotten by the world, yet never fully silenced. Known only through scattered records and whispered accounts as Anlage V17, the site was believed to be a weapons testing ground. But recent discoveries suggest its purpose was far more disturbing. The story began in 2023, when a pair of amateur urban explorers, following the path of a derelict railway spur, stumbled upon a rusted steel hatch embedded in the forest floor. Covered in decades of undergrowth, the entrance appeared accidental, until they saw the symbol, the faded insignia of the Third Reich etched into the metal. Below, a spiral staircase led to a world untouched by time. Descending into the depths, they found themselves in a concrete corridor lined with rotted wiring and crumbling signage in Gothic German script. The air was thick, not just with mold but with something else, something heavier. Doors sealed with rusted bolts marked rooms labeled Testkammer and Subjekt Vorbereitungsraum. They would later admit the most terrifying part was the silence. Not a hum of machinery. Not a single rat. Just the unnatural stillness of a place abandoned in terror. Inside the first chamber, the explorers found tables bolted to the ground, their surfaces scored with gouges. Straps dangled from each corner. Walls bore scorch marks, suggesting fire or chemical reactions. In one corner, a shattered observation window looked into a separate chamber filled with long-dried glass shards and the remnants of what could only be described as a humanoid restraint device. Graffiti in red paint across the wall read simply, "Sie haben Geskrien," they screamed. Local historians were hesitant to comment. The Harz region, especially during the late years of the war, was dotted with secretive Nazi installations, many devoted to what they called Wunderwaffe, wonder weapons. Anlage V17 was supposedly connected to these efforts, but details had always been scarce. Military records revealed only one reference, a partially redacted directive ordering the transfer of biological assets from the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp to an undisclosed testing site within Sector H. What made the facility truly infamous, however, wasn't the equipment, it was the journal. In a sealed cabinet behind a false wall, the explorers uncovered a water-damaged notebook, its leather binding marked with the Waffen-SS symbol. Inside, in slanted, almost frantic script, a scientist identified only as Dr. Kurt Wessler recorded a series of entries detailing biological endurance trials, experiments involving exposure to prototype nerve agents and pressurized environments. One entry read, "Subject 14 exhibited exceptional tolerance until 5.3 minutes. Convulsions began after auditory hallucinations were induced via frequency exposure. Subject begged in Polish, repeatedly referencing the shadow man in the wall. Test terminated. Disposal ordered." The journal confirmed what many had feared. Human experimentation was not only practiced but refined within Anlage V17. But it was the final pages that chilled even seasoned investigators. Dr. Wessler wrote of a special project, Project Mitternacht, Midnight Project. This initiative was apparently an attempt to use chemical exposure and high-frequency sound to induce altered states in prisoners. The objective: create soldiers with heightened aggression and no fear. Local residents in the nearby village of Elbingerode had always known something was wrong with the area. Elderly villagers remembered tales from their parents, stories of trucks arriving in the night, screams echoing from the woods, and men in long coats who warned locals never to stray off the paths. Some even claimed that the forest never felt normal after the war. Animals avoided it. Campfires wouldn't stay lit. And, most unsettling of all, People spoke of hearing voices when the wind passed through certain trees. A formal excavation team returned to the site months later and discovered a sealed chamber deeper within the mountain. It had been intentionally blocked off with explosive charges. Once cleared, the team uncovered skeletal remains, some human, others deformed beyond recognition. One body, strapped to a chair, still wore a name tag, Oberarzt Klaus H. Stein. His last act, it seemed, was to chain the door shut from the inside. Forensics found unnatural calcium deposits in the bones of several corpses, possibly the result of prolonged chemical exposure. Walls were covered in more graffiti, this time in scratched Polish and Yiddish, prayers and pleas etched into stone. Near the center of the chamber sat a large cylindrical tank, shattered, its contents long evaporated. Around it, charred remains suggested an internal fire. But the most disturbing detail came from a soot-covered plaque still hanging above the tank, for das neue Morgenrot. For the new dawn. Despite growing media interest, the German government restricted further access. The official line was public safety concerns. Unofficially, whispers spoke of the discovery of audio reels recorded during the experiments. These recordings, when played, reportedly caused dizziness, nausea, and in one case, seizures among listeners. A technician even claimed to hear his own name spoken in the background of a tape from 1945. To this day, the area around Anlage V17 remains fenced and monitored. Locals still refuse to enter the forest. Some call it haunted. Others say it's cursed. But a few, especially those who've dared to get too close, say it's not empty. They say they've heard screams, whispers, machinery, and sometimes, footsteps. High in the Austrian Alps, where snow clings year-round to razor-sharp peaks and the winds cut through even the thickest coats, there lies a hidden crevasse known only to locals as Totenschlucht, Death's Gorge. For decades, rumors surrounded the jagged ridge, that the Nazis carved tunnels into the mountain during the final years of the war, that they were testing something unholy. In 2022, after an unusually warm summer revealed the edge of a collapsed tunnel mouth, a team of geologists stumbled upon something more than just glacial rock. They found what would become known as the frozen labyrinth, and the truth about Operation Silberhauch, or Silver Breath. The tunnel, long hidden beneath meters of snow and ice, led to a steel blast door sealed tight with frozen rust. It took nearly 2 weeks to cut through. Behind it, a narrow corridor carved directly into the mountain stone, reinforced with concrete and lined with thick, frost-covered cables. The air was dry and painfully cold. But the deeper the team ventured, the more they realized this was no ordinary wartime bunker. Blueprints recovered later from a Berlin archive identified the site as Lager 12K, a facility designated for climate endurance trials and environmental weaponization. In short, it was an extreme cold testing base. The goal of Operation Silberhauch was to determine how long soldiers and prisoners could survive in Arctic conditions. But the records hinted at something even more grotesque: the use of low-oxygen chambers, cryogenic experimentation, and aerosol-based biological agents. One chamber, marked Kammer 4, contained 6 steel coffins with viewports in their lids. Inside, the preserved remains of human subjects, still partially frozen. Tests confirmed they had been exposed to sub-zero temperatures in pressurized conditions. A female corpse, still in tattered camp prisoner clothing, was frozen mid-scream. Her face, skin blackened by frostbite, was contorted in terror. At the heart of the facility was a control room, eerily preserved. The machines were long dead, but the logbooks remained intact. A single phrase appeared repeatedly in red ink: Todlich nach 11 Minuten, fatal after 11 minutes. The notes described trials in which prisoners were exposed to a silver vapor, a compound derived from liquid nitrogen and aerosolized pathogens. The scientist in charge, a Dr. Leopold Fuchs, believed the extreme cold could activate certain biological responses that made the human body more susceptible, or more resilient, to biological agents. But the side effects were horrific. One of the entries, dated January 12, 1945, read, Subject 19 lasted 9 minutes before organ failure began. The compound reacted with the lungs, causing crystallization. Frost formed inside the eyes. But before death, the subject screamed in what appeared to be Slavic. He described a presence in the chamber, a silver-faced man watching him. Psychological break? Hallucination? Or something else? Fuchs noted that 3 test subjects claimed to have seen the same figure, a man with no face, made of mist and ice. Though initially dismissed as hypothermic hallucination, one guard reported seeing a similar form during maintenance work. After his suicide 3 days later, Fuchs ordered all non-essential staff evacuated. But the most damning evidence came in the form of an audio recording buried under a fallen console. It was labeled Versuch 24, Morgenkalt, Trial 24, Morning Cold. The tape contained the sounds of lab techs preparing a chamber, mechanical valves hissing, and then a high-pitched tone. The final 30 seconds were filled with agonizing screams and a word repeated over and over in German, Es let. It's alive. The recovered journal of Dr. Fuchs showed his descent into obsession. He believed that at extreme cold, the body approached a liminal state between life and death, one he called Das Grauzwischen, the gray between. He theorized that this between state might be exploited for near-death endurance, or even reanimation. He wrote of dreams where the mountain whispered to him, and of a need to go deeper. The final entry, I will join them tonight. In the ice. In the gray. I will speak to the silence. Rescue teams found the lower levels of the labyrinth collapsed, apparently from an internal explosion. Chunks of flesh and bone had frozen into the walls. A makeshift shrine built from test equipment stood near the epicenter. At its center, a block of ice containing what appeared to be a partially preserved heart, pulsating slightly, though this was dismissed as a visual illusion caused by melting layers. Local legends from the nearby village of Oberzenitz claim that during the war, children often disappeared near the forest paths leading up the mountain. Elders remembered seeing soldiers with dogs combing the area, but no one ever came back down with the children. Many believe the Nazis were using local civilians for test subjects. In modern times, hikers who approach Totenschlucht report strange cold snaps, hallucinations, and phantom voices. One alpinist claimed to have seen a human figure standing still at the highest ridge, dressed in torn prisoner garb, despite no one else being on the mountain for miles. The Austrian government, when pressed, confirmed only that the site existed and was under evaluation for historical preservation. But since the discovery, multiple research teams have reported missing equipment, corrupted data files, and unexplained audio anomalies when working on analysis of the recordings. Some refused to return to the site entirely, calling it cursed. Perhaps the most haunting artifact recovered was a tattered postcard found in what must have been a prisoner's bunk. On it, scrawled in pencil, were the words, "If you find this, know that we were frozen, but we never slept. We watched the cold breathe. And it watched back." Beneath the bustling streets of modern Berlin lies a forgotten substructure, buried beneath layers of concrete, secrecy, and guilt. For decades, historians focused on well-known sites like Hitler's Führerbunker and the SS headquarters at Prinz-Albrechtstrasse. But rumors persisted of a hidden chamber, one that never appeared on any map, one that even former SS officers refused to speak of. It was whispered about only in fragmented phrases: the room that hears you scream, the black corridor, the chamber of echoes. It would come to be known by the name given in the few surviving Nazi memos: Das Echozimmer, the echo chamber. In 2019, during routine maintenance on Berlin's U-Bahn Line 2, engineers discovered a sealed passage behind a false maintenance wall. Oddly, the concrete was reinforced not with steel, but lead, an expensive and unusual material for standard wartime bunkers. After drilling through, the workers emerged into a stairwell that descended nearly 40 feet into darkness. At the bottom lay a corridor lined with decaying soundproof panels and rusted copper wiring. The air was dry, yet heavy with a strange stillness. On one wall, nearly faded to invisibility, was an embossed SS insignia surrounded by jagged German text: Wort sind Waffen, words are weapons. The structure was soon taken over by historical investigators and forensic experts. What they uncovered was a subterranean facility designed not for command, storage, or escape, but for psychological experimentation. The chamber at its core was hexagonal, its walls lined with acoustic baffles and directional speakers. In the center stood a metal chair bolted to the floor, restraints dangling from its arms. Facing it was a single microphone suspended from the ceiling, connected to what appeared to be a primitive yet highly specialized audio system. Scattered around the chamber were stacks of reel-to-reel tapes labeled with codes like VST9 and Schmerz A. One tape, dated March 1944, was the first to be restored and played. What began as a simple test tone soon escalated into an agonizing blend of human screams, whispered commands, and phrases repeated endlessly in German, Yiddish, and Slavic dialects. "You are forgotten. You are alone. No one is coming for you. Repeat. You are forgotten." The volume fluctuated, rising and falling in calculated intervals. The voice, always calm, always precise, repeated psychological triggers, each more unsettling than the last. Experts in audio psychology who analyzed the recordings described the tactics as early models of auditory disintegration, a method of inducing psychosis and emotional collapse through sound alone. Further investigation unearthed logs written by an SS audio technician named Otto Jürgens. In his notebooks, Jürgens described how prisoners, mostly political dissidents and captured agents, were placed in the chamber for extended periods, sometimes days, with no food, no light, only continuous sound. These weren't just interrogations. They were acoustic experiments in psychological annihilation. One passage reads, "Subject number 26 exhibited severe dissociative behavior after 32 hours. She no longer responded to her name. Began to mimic the recordings, her own voice repeating the words in perfect timing. When we stopped the tape, she began screaming in sync with the final tone, as if she had become part of it." Another entry tells of a test with layered voices. "We mixed her father's voice, recorded during her arrest, with clips of her own interrogation, overlaid with low-frequency rumble and infant cries. Within 6 hours she had clawed through her restraints and attempted to tear out her own ears." But perhaps most disturbing was the recurring mention of Program Echofall, a secret SS directive aimed at creating a weaponized form of interrogation so advanced, so psychologically devastating, that no one could resist it. The notes claimed that sound itself could shatter identity, memory, even the will to live. Strangely, the chamber was also rigged to record the prisoners' own reactions and play them back in altered form. Echoes of their own screams, twisted in pitch or time, would loop endlessly. Survivors, if there were any, were often unrecognizable, both physically and mentally. One sealed cabinet in the archive room held fragments of identity tags, clearly from civilians, and a tattered cloth doll found on the floor, its head severed and placed carefully beside a speaker. No one knows how it got there. As more tapes were restored, experts began reporting bizarre incidents. Audio specialists complained of migraines and nausea when working with certain frequencies. One researcher claimed she heard her late mother's voice whispering to her through static. A sound engineer from Leipzig suffered a breakdown and was hospitalized after reporting that, "The tape is speaking to me even when it's off." The German government briefly considered opening the site as a museum of wartime atrocity. But after 4 researchers independently submitted formal requests for psychological leave within 2 months of exposure to the site, the project was abandoned. The entrance was resealed. Yet the legend of the echo chamber did not end there. In 2021, an anonymous leak on a dark web forum posted a single audio file labeled Echo 0. The uploader claimed it was extracted from a hidden bunker in Berlin, part of an unreleased SS experiment. Listeners reported strange effects, feelings of paranoia, hallucinations, temporary memory lapses. The forum was deleted within 48 hours. Some believe that Program Echofall was never completed. Others say it was perfected, but buried, because even its creators feared its power. A handful of former Soviet agents, debriefed after the Cold War, described hearing rumors of a Nazi sound weapon, so terrifying that the KGB ordered all captured Nazi acoustic research destroyed. But one defecting agent claimed the Soviets tried to replicate it, unsuccessfully. Today, beneath Berlin, the chamber still exists. Cold. Silent. Waiting. Those who have been near it swear the walls hum faintly if you listen long enough. Not like machinery. Not like wind. Like something trying to remember how to scream. In the heart of North Rhine-Westphalia stands Wewelsburg Castle, a grim, triangular fortress perched atop a hill and long associated with the darkest ambitions of the SS. Known for its transformation under Heinrich Himmler into an ideological center for the Nazi elite, Wewelsburg is already infamous in the annals of occult history. But the real horror lies not within its imposing walls, but beneath them, in a subterranean complex unearthed by accident in 2020. What was discovered was not merely a forgotten bunker, it was a shrine of control, ritual, and human sacrifice. Renovation crews working on structural stabilization at the North Tower encountered an abnormal vibration in the stone floor. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a massive hollow space 30 feet below, a space not accounted for in any architectural record. Initial excavation revealed a spiral staircase carved directly into bedrock, its edges worn smooth as if by hundreds of feet over years. At its base, a reinforced steel door sealed from the inside, with a single word engraved in High German above it, Abstieg, descent. When the chamber was finally opened, investigators were stunned to discover a vast underground hall, circular and domed, its walls covered in esoteric symbols, some Norse, others more obscure, bordering on the occult. In the center of the room, beneath an iron chandelier fashioned like a swastika sunwheel, stood a 12-pointed granite altar stained with what forensics later confirmed was human blood. Surrounding the altar were skeletal remains, 7 bodies arranged in a circle, each missing their right hand. This chamber, it would be learned, was part of Project Aurenstein, a secret SS initiative meant to merge ancient Teutonic ritual with Nazi racial ideology. Himmler, obsessed with mysticism and the supposed power of ancestral bloodlines, authorized a hidden department within the Ahnenerbe, the Nazi Ancestral Heritage Division, to explore ritualistic methods of unlocking the Aryan will. Evidence uncovered in the complex included leather-bound volumes written in a combination of Old Norse and Modern German. One fragment, translated roughly, read, "The blood of the unworthy is the fuel. The stone shall drink. The voice shall rise again." But it wasn't just ritual paraphernalia that shocked the archaeological team, it was the mechanical infrastructure hidden behind the ritualism. Behind false panels, researchers found a series of sound-conducting tubes, gas vents, and, most disturbingly, a ventilation system connected to adjoining chambers. The layout suggested that the altar room was not symbolic but functional, a kind of psychotropic delivery system. The adjacent chambers held even more unsettling discoveries. One contained 2 mummified corpses, their mouths filled with burned parchment. Nearby, a chalk circle still lingered on the stone floor, surrounding what looked like dried blood and shattered crystal fragments. Another chamber contained a bronze chair fused to the floor, its back engraved with Nordic runes. From its base extended copper tubing, leading to an adjoining wall filled with switches and gauges. A recovered SS logbook referred to it as the will receiver. Surviving pages from a notebook belonging to a Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Focken claim the device was used to test the emission of psychic resistance in impure subjects. In simpler terms, it was an experimental machine designed to test if torture victims could generate psychic energy. Focken's notes detail horrifying procedures, ritualized executions, gas-induced hallucinations, sensory deprivation in conjunction with chanting. One passage reads, "At 3 o'clock hours, Subject B, 47, was exposed to black vapor. Upon collapse, the device registered an anomaly in field strength. All present described hearing a second voice, unaccounted for, speaking through Subject B, 47. It repeated only one phrase. He still walks beneath the stones." But the most terrifying discovery was a sealed archive room. There, behind steel bars, lay dozens of skulls, some clearly deformed, each mounted on stone plinths and connected to wires. A single button on the wall was labeled, "Contact Versuch." Attempt to contact. When authorities tried to trace the personnel listed in the site's documents, they found that nearly all involved in Project Aurenstein vanished in 1945. No known death records. No survivors. Except one, a technician named Elias Brack. He was located in Argentina, living under an alias. In a rare 1987 interview, he confessed only one thing. The chamber was never for listening. It was for inviting. We built it wrong. It didn't hear us. But something else did. He died 6 days later. No cause of death was identified. Locals in the area have long spoken of strange events near Wewelsburg. Cold winds on windless days. Dead birds found in perfect circles. Children waking from sleep with scratches in their skin, whispering about the man with no eyes. Some believe the chamber beneath the castle was not simply a laboratory, but a ritual gate, meant to connect the SS to an ancient force that even they could not control. In recent years, the German Historical Protection Agency has barred any further excavation of the site, citing public psychological safety. Still, trespassers and thrill-seekers attempt to sneak in, though most are never seen again. Those who do return speak of disembodied voices, shadows that move against geometry, and a dull chanting that cannot be silenced, even once outside. The final, chilling artifact recovered before the site was sealed was a reel of damaged film showing SS officers gathered around the altar, chanting. In the background, smoke begins to rise, not from fire, but seemingly from the stone itself. The film ends abruptly, but audio recovered from the strip caught a faint voice, not matching any known speaker. It simply said, "He waits still." In the depths of Germany's Black Forest, where the canopy chokes out even midday sun and moss covers every stone like a burial shroud, there exists a place the locals refuse to name aloud. Marked on no modern map, known only to a handful of wartime documents, it was codenamed Bunker Feldgrau, Field Grey Bunker, after the dull, deathly color of the uniforms worn by its first and final residents. Unlike other Nazi facilities, Bunker Feldgrau was not built for defense, storage, or strategy. It was built for silence. The structure was uncovered in 2015 by a group of amateur explorers following rumors passed down in hushed tones, tales of German soldiers entering the woods in 1944 and never returning, and of Allied search teams who vanished just the same. Their discovery began with a moss-covered hatch, sunken into the ground beneath collapsed pine trees. When opened, it released a gasp of fetid air, as if the forest had been holding its breath for decades. The explorers descended a rusted ladder into total blackness. What they found defied explanation, a series of narrow corridors lined with rooms whose walls were padded with dense insulation. Not merely for soundproofing, these walls had been designed to consume sound. Shouting produced only a whisper. Footsteps were swallowed before they could echo. Inside one chamber, there were restraints bolted to the floor, facing a blank wall. No windows. No lights. Just an odd device resembling a speaker without a cone, its interior lined with obsidian tiles. It took researchers weeks to uncover the truth of the site, and even then, much of it remained buried in conspiracy and fear. A declassified SS memo later confirmed Bunker Feldgrau's purpose: Project Silberhauch, Project Silberhauch. Its aim? To weaponize silence itself. The idea came from a twisted branch of Nazi pseudoscience that believed silence, when applied in complete isolation, could break the human mind more effectively than any interrogation. It wasn't torture through noise, it was torture through the absence of noise. Sensory deprivation, but refined into a science. One recovered document described the theory in chilling terms. The human soul requires reflection to sustain identity. In complete silence, the self becomes untethered. Thought becomes looped. Emotion frays. The subject seeks sound, any sound, to prove existence. And when there is none, they begin to hear the only thing left, themselves. Prisoners were placed in the chambers for days at a time. Some lasted hours before breaking. Others scratched the walls until their fingernails split. In the few cases where the subjects were recovered alive, they had to be strapped down to prevent self-harm. Their words, when they spoke again, were fragmented and fevered, ramblings about voices in the quiet, shadows with no source, and a presence they referred to only as der andere, the other. A journal belonging to Oberst Franz Mahler, the bunker's commanding officer, detailed his increasing paranoia. Initially a believer in Silberhauch's potential, Mahler became convinced that something had gone wrong, terribly wrong. One entry reads, "The silence is no longer silent. Something lives in it. Something we've made, or awakened. The men hear breathing when there is none. I've ordered 4 sealed inside. Not for testing. For containment." The 4 he referenced were members of Mahler's own guard, reportedly affected after standing too close to an open chamber. Their final log entry was a single sentence scrawled repeatedly in pencil, hundreds of times: "We are not alone in the hush." One chamber, named Das or the ear, contained equipment wired to capture minute sound waves. Yet the recordings captured played back only static, until one technician, reviewing old tapes, boosted the gain beyond safe levels. What emerged chilled him to the core. At first, only silence. Then a faint rhythmic pulse, too regular for static. It rose in pitch, forming something like a whisper. Analysts who reviewed the tape said it resembled a voice speaking backwards. When reversed, the phrase was unmistakable. "You left us in the dark, but we learned to speak." Some believed the experiments in silence acted like a ritual in reverse, a draining of spiritual energy that tore open something deeper. A wound in reality where absence became invitation. What filled that absence is still unknown. But there were survivors. One, a young technician named Lucas Dietrich, escaped shortly before the war's end. He was found wandering the forest, covered in lacerations, deaf and mute. His hearing returned months later, but he refused to speak. When he finally did, he said only, "Don't let them open it again. They aren't gone. They're just listening." In 2016, 2 of the original explorers who found Bunker Feldgrau returned to document their find. They never came out. A third was found near the hatch 2 days later, uninjured but hysterical. He had removed his own eardrums using a penknife. His only explanation? "I couldn't take the whispering anymore. It started soft, but then it was inside. Like thoughts that weren't mine." The German government has since buried the site under tons of concrete, fencing off the area as a biological hazard zone. Local legends speak of hikers who go missing and of forest animals found in unnatural silence, their throats unmarked but lungs collapsed, as if screamed empty in a place that doesn't allow screams. Those who research Bunker Feldgrau often report strange phenomena: muted audio during phone calls, sudden nosebleeds when listening to the recovered tapes, and a recurring dream of a black corridor that stretches forever, and a whisper that grows louder the deeper one walks. Some say silence is golden. But in the bowels of the Black Forest, silence is a trap, and it listens back. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?